Secretary of the branch CSG Vasudeva Murthy, my fellow committee members, senior members of the profession, past chairmen of the branch, and members gathered today for this virtual seminar. A very good evening to one and all. Today's session on the topic, actually we have chosen only one topic, but the speaker is kind enough to extend the topic because we have a time for 1 more hour. As the speaker said, it won't take more than 1 hour for this session to be covered. A new subsection 1H has been inserted in section 206C by the Finance Act 2020 for collection of TCS by the seller on sale of any goods. Though collection of TCS on sale of certain goods were already covered under different subsections of the section 206C, however, all the remaining goods which were not so covered under other provisions of section 206C have now been brought under the ambit of TCS by inserting the subsection 1H in section of 206. The provision of subsection 1H of section 206C has been made effective from 1st October of 2020. So speaker was kind enough to extend with the case studies along with the latest circulars and notification in the Income Tax Act relating to 44AB, AD and ADA. With this, we are very much fortunate today, sir, because I have seen the virtual video session of yours, and it was really a wonderful session, very detailedly explained by you. Hope the Visakhapatnam branch members also get benefit out of your deliberations today, sir. Thank you. I request Prashant, Treasurer, to introduce the speaker.
Good evening all. CA Harith Dhariwala, a qualified chartered accountant with more than 12 years of post-qualification experience in a statutory and internal audits, taxation, treasury and risk management, company law advisory and project finance. Earlier, he associated with Sterlite Industries India Limited, now renamed as Vedanta Limited, as an assistant manager treasury at Mumbai. He managed Indian and overseas treasury functions and handled investment portfolio of group of approximately 7.5 billion US dollars, both onshores and offshores. He involved in the projects of raising and investment management for convertible bonds and American deposit receipts, that is ADRs. He made arrangements for fulfillment of the short-term and long-term funds requirement of the company by raising funds through parking credits, issuing MIBOR linked fixed rate non-convertible debentures, commercial papers, or bank loans. He presently is a partner at Ashok Dhariwala & Co., Chartered Accountants, Ahmedabad, and is involved in statutory audits, internal audits, direct advisory, direct tax advisory, GST advisory, project finance, and subsidies. He holds degree with the ranking position as a chartered accountant and qualified as an information system auditor. He has completed a master degree course and certificate course of ICAI on international finance reporting standards. He elected as a managing committee member of Ahmedabad branch of WIRC of ICAI for the term 2016 to 19 and 2019 to 2022. He elected as a vice chairman of Ahmedabad branch for the term 2020 to 21. Ahmedabad branch is the second largest CA branch in the country with more than 10,500 CA members and 30,000 CA students. He regularly speaks at various professional forums and have delivered lectures at various study circles and branches of ICAI. He had avid learner and regular attends the CPA seminars, study circle discussions on diverse topics, and reads various professional journals to keep himself abreast of the latest development. With these few lines, I am happy to introduce CA Harith Dhariwala to the August gathering. I request to Madam to take the proceedings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prashant, for the brief introduction. And sir, coincidentally, as this as the act This has come into force from 1st October. In our October newsletter, one of our members from Visakhapatnam has given an article on the same session. Now, I think after listening to you, if they go through the article, they can understand more benefit out of it. Thank you, sir. I request you to go ahead with the session.
Thank you, ma'am. Respected Chairperson of Visakhapatnam branch, Bharti ma'am, very respected Kumar sir, the Treasurer Prasant sir, and all the other dignitaries. It's great to connect virtually. I think though we are 1600 kilometers apart, I think it's great to come to Visakhapatnam on a virtual thing. It's great to be in, I think I should say, the city of destiny. It's called the Jewel of the East Coast. So I'm very happy to be here. And today the topic that has been given is about the TCS on sale of goods, and I also sort of delivering something on the tax audit because it's right now the hottest topic. I think everybody is concerned with this thing. So with this, let me first share my screen. I'll have my presentation on now. Yeah, is the screen visible? Yeah. So I think before I just get on to my presentation, I want to start with a small story which I normally do every time. I think we all are in the office right now, maybe busy with the entire day's work. So let us kind of a little chill before we get on to the main topic. So the story was of a gun shooter. A person wanted to learn gun shooting, and when he wanted to learn gun shooting, he approached an expert that please teach me gun shooting. And the expert said, okay, I will get a gun, I'll get a license for you, and then we will practice, and you can learn, you can learn gun shooting like this. So the person said, okay, after a week you come to my house, I have a big backyard there, and we can practice gun shooting there. So the expert said, okay. So after 1 week, when the expert visited him and went to his backyard, he could see a lot of the bullet marks on the wall, and around the bullet marks there were circles drawn of the same radius. Now it's called the bullseye. The middle in the middle of the circle there were bullet marks. So the expert was surprised. He said that who did this? And the person who is yet to learn, he said that sir, I only did this. So the expert said, now he was flabbergasted, like how I'm yet like even 25 years as an expert and I can't do it. How did you do it? Did you go near and shoot? How did you do it? So the person said, no sir, with the same distance with which you shoot in the competition, I shot with the same distance. So then the expert said that now you have to teach me how did you do it, because I have to learn from you. So the person said that sir, you draw the circle and then shoot, and I shot and then I draw the circle. So friends, now with this, I could like to relate to what I want to say with this example is that earlier there were times when we used to shoot and then we used to draw the circle. Everything was not so much linked, but now friends, circle is already drawn with the kind of provisions that the government is bringing in, especially provisions like the TCS, the new form 26AS, and even the GST amendment that we are seeing in, everything is getting so much linked that the circle is drawn. Now we have to play within the own circle and advise our clients accordingly. I think you all should know that right now the government is also focusing on how to have a 360-degree profile of the taxpayer. If right now 26AS is the scope of 26AS is elongated so much, I think maybe tomorrow if you purchase from Amazon, it might also come in what 26AS. We don't know. So with the kind of interlinking and the kind of effort that the government is taking in, we have to now start, rather than just being a simple compliance provider, to be a more consultant and a business solution provider to our clients. So with this, I think let us start with the presentation. So what I'm going to cover today, something on the TCS, the main topic on the sale of goods. So I have covered a few posers, and even if you have any questions, we can discuss in the chat box. Overview. So what I've done is section 44 AB, AD and ADA. There are a lot of confusions whether to be done audit or not, what are the provisions. So we will discuss those provisions. Then recently on 1st October, there are a few changes in the tax audit report. We will discuss that. Then if time permits, we'll also go through a decent circulars notification that will come by the income tax department, and then a few of the concluding notes. So let us have the TCS. So I think those who are like seniors like Kumar sir and all would be knowing that in 1998, section 44 AC and 206C were introduced by the Finance Act 1998. And these were the times wherein, the first time presumptive taxation was introduced for the goods. And similarly, there was a taxation TCS introduced for the collection for timber leaves, timber, for 10 leaves and other stuffs. So post that 44AC is now no more there in statute, but 206 is still there. And I could recollect since I am in Visakhapatnam, I have to present this very famous Andhra Pradesh High Court judgment, which was again seconded by Supreme Court, which says that TCS, it was basically on the constitutionality of TCS, and the reply was that yes, a TCS can be collected, and the court, this is the extract that I want to share. The court held that the standard by which the amount of tax is measured, being the purchase price, would not alter the nature of basis. So basically, they were of the opinion that even if the TCS is levied on the purchase price, the validity constitutionally it is valid. So now there is no question whether TCS on sale of goods will stand the constitutionality, because already TCS is constitutionally valid. So this is something on the TCS as we discussed. This is a snapshot. 206C subsection 1, which we all are aware, it deals with the TCS on sale of goods. So alcoholic liquor, Tendu leaves, and these are all the different sections which fall under this, which have anywhere between 1% to 5% is the tax rate. 206C 1C, which talks about the grant of license, lease, etc. for parking lots. So 206, I'm specifying these sections here because going forward we have to refer to these sections, so it will be easy for you to connect. 206C 1C talks about license, lease of parking lot, toll plaza, mining and quarrying, which has a special TCS rate. Now coming to 206C 1F, sale of motor vehicle, it has a limit of 10 lakhs. If the threshold crosses 10 lakhs, the TCS will be 1%. Then the two important TCS sections which are introduced by Finance Act 2020, 206C 1G and 1H. So 206C 1G talks about if you make any remittance outside India through an LRS scheme, the authorized dealer will have to collect TCS at the rate of 5%, provided the amount is more than 7 lakh rupees. And there was just an exception that if you take an education loan and if the remit amount outside India for education purposes, the TCS rate is not 5%, it is 1.5%. Now apart from that, another thing is for that overseas tour package. Now this is something wherein there is no threshold limit. The 7 lakhs is only for the AD, authorized dealer, which has to collect for the LRS. For the overseas tour package, there is no threshold limit. Even if you have a package of 10,000, 20,000, whatever amount, the TCS will have to be collected at a rate of 5%. So suppose after COVID ends and your chairperson Bharti ma'am and others decide you to take outside country for an overseas trip, then TCS will have to be applicable on that trip as well. This is the first thing that we thought, that as a branch, when we do it, TCS will have to be applicable. So 206C 1H is what we are going to discuss now, TCS on sale of goods. And we have a lot of FAQs which will be dealing it. So coming to section now. So what I've done is I have basically broken up the section into different parts. We will read each and every part of the section because each and every part has its own importance. So every person, so it applies to every person. Being a seller, so very important, the person has to be a seller. Now who is a seller? The amount has, the definition of seller is given in the section itself. Who receives any amount as consideration for sale of any goods. Now why I am reading this verbatim, because it is very important to understand that who receives, it is on the receipt, any amount as consideration for sale of any goods. It is not goods that link to your business, any goods. I'm just reading the words. Of the value or aggregate of such value exceeding 50 lakh rupees in any previous year, other than the goods being exported out of India. So there are two exceptions. If the goods are being exported out of India, or if the goods are covered under subsection 1, 1F or 1G, as we discussed. 1 talks about the Tendu leaves, timber, and etc. 1F talks about the motor vehicle, and 1G talks about the authorized dealer and the overseas tour package. So if the goods are other than these two exceptions, shall at the time of, the trigger point is at the time of receipt of such amount. So whenever you receipt of such amount, the seller will have to collect from the buyer. So again, an important word, who is a buyer, we'll discuss. Collect from the buyer a sum equal to 0.1% of the sale consideration exceeding 50 lakh rupees. So it is not up to 50, above 50 lakh rupees, whatever amount you receive, you will have to collect 0.1% as a TCS. Now, the provision is that if there is no Aadhaar or no PAN, in that case, the 1% will have to be collected as TCS amount. So I hope the section is more or less clear. Now we'll come to the definition of important definition. So who is a buyer? So provided further, the provision of this section will not apply in case you have any transaction on which TDS has been deducted. in that case the provision will not be applicable. Now, two important definitions: who is a buyer and who is a seller. So, who is a buyer? A buyer means a person who purchases any goods but does not include. So, out of the other two, like buyer means a person who purchases any goods but does not include. First is central government, state government, that is very common, we'll ignore it. Second, local authority is okay. Point number C, a person importing goods into India. So, if there is any person who is importing goods into India, he will not be a buyer. So in that case, TCS on imports will not be leviable. So there is a non-resident seller who sells something to India and to Indian customer. In that case, the TCS will not be applicable. Now, perhaps the most important definition of the seller. So seller means a person whose total sales, gross receipts or turnover from the business carried on by him exceed 10 crore rupees during the financial year immediately preceding the financial year in which the sale has carried out. So if you are, for example, we are standing in the financial year 2021, if in financial year 1920 your turnover exceeds 10 crore rupees, then you are a seller. Now whether the turnover will include GST or not, that we will see in the slides to come. So what is the overview now? So overview is it's levy on any person who is a seller of goods. It is wide enough to cover everybody. If the word person is used, trigger is on the seller who receives any amount of consideration for goods exceeding 50 lakh rupees. Seller shall collect to the buyer a sum equal to 0.1% of sale consideration exceeding 50 lakh rupees if valid PAN is provided. Now there are certain guidelines which are yet to be issued and provisions are effective from 1st October. So okay, there are two other sections. Now whatever TCS is collected on your behalf, you can get the credit of the TCS. There is section 206C subsection 4. It talks about the credit that you will get, and there is rule 37I, sub rule 2A. It talks about that like we get in TDS, similarly TCS credit will also be given. So now meaning of goods. So first and foremost, we discuss what is goods. So goods again is not defined in the Income Tax Act. It is not defined specifically for this section also. So we draw definition from two different acts. Now first is a more specific act, that is Sale of Goods Act, and other is a more general, that is the GST Act. Now GST Act deals more with the supply of goods, while Sale of Goods Act is more specific. So if we discuss through Sale of Goods Act, I'll read the definition. Goods means every kind of movable property other than actionable claims and money, and includes stock and shares, growing crops, grass and things, etc. So basically any kind of movable property is goods. So my first question would be, what about immovable property? So building, is it a goods? The answer would be no. So if it is not goods, it is outside the purview of TCS provisions. So we'll go ahead with the questions and then we can discuss more on that. So before I take the FAQs, I have two important circulars that the government had brought in. On 29th of September, circular number 17, government had brought in, which clarified a lot of things. So the first and important thing that is clarified is the threshold limit. So I'll read the subsection 2. It says that since the subsection 1H applies on receipt of sale consideration, the provisions will not apply on any sale consideration received before 1st October. Now, what is the relevance of this? There are a lot of questions that what would if the sale concession was received before 1st October? So for example, let us talk with examples. Suppose I have received 35 lakhs before 30th of September and balance 15 lakhs on 1st of October. Whether TCS will be applicable? The answer would be no. Because 35 lakhs plus 50 lakhs, the limit is 50 lakhs. It is not cross 50 lakhs. Second question. If I have received 85 lakh rupees before 30th of September, whether I have to collect TCS on that amount? The answer is no, because the amount was received before 1st October. Hence, TCS will not have to be collected on that amount, even if the sale is made earlier. Now, point number 3. Since the threshold, so what they had done is how to calculate this amount. Now, they have clarified in point number 3. Since the threshold of 50 lakh rupees is with respect to the previous year, calculation of receipt of sale consideration for triggering TCS shall be from 1st April. As I said, as I clarified, so if you have received 85 lakhs from 1st April till 30th of September, no need to collect TCS. However, the 50 lakhs threshold will be utilized there, and even on the one amount rupees that you received on 1st October, TCS will have to be collected. So they have clarified, this was more or less real, but they have just clarified. Now for motor vehicle, I just brief you one thing. There is section 1F. So there was a 2016 circular of CBDT which told that there's a manufacturer, there's a dealer, and then there's an end customer. So if there's a sale from a manufacturer to the dealer that was out of the scope of 1F, that the CBDT had clarified. Only the vehicle that is sold by the dealer to the end consumer is under the scope of 2061F. That was clarified. Now what they have further clarified is manufacturer to dealer, which is not under 1F, TCS under 1H, that is the current 50 lakhs, is applicable. That is what they have clarified. And secondly, what they have clarified is, suppose I am a dealer and if I sell to the end consumer, the amount is let's say 9 lakhs. So I am out of 1H, 1F because it is less than 10 lakh rupees. But what if I sell him 10 cars of let's say 9 lakhs? In that case, the amount exceeds 50 lakhs, hence it will be under 2061H. So both provisions will have to be seen when we talk about the dealer and the customer, and the manufacturer and dealer only subsection 1H, that is sale of goods of 50 lakhs, will have to be seen. This is what they clarified. Now the most important clarification, what about sales return, what about discount, what about IDT, that is GST. So they have clarified that whatever amount you receive, you have to see that amount irrespective of the sales return, irrespective of the discount, irrespective of the GST. So it means that even on the GST portion, TCS will have to be collected. I think administratively it is a very good decision, and I'll tell you why. So suppose you have 100 rupees of sales, you have 100 plus 18, 118 rupees of invoice made, and you get 118 rupees from your customer. So TCS of 0.1% or 0.075% for this year will have to be collected on 118 rupees and not 100 rupees. Now why this is a good decision? I'll tell you, because suppose there are goods which are having multiple GST rates and you have a single invoice. Like for example, you have certain goods at 5%, certain at 12%, certain at 18%, and you make one invoice and you receive a part payment out of it. Now how are you going to bifurcate that amount? It will be practically very difficult. So for the ease of, I think it is for ease of our calculations and our compliances, that whatever amount we receive, including the GST amount, we have to collect TCS on that amount. Now, I think before we move on further, I think one more thing is very important, that how to collect TCS, as in whether you have to start charging on the invoice or do you have to raise a debit note. Now, my first question to all of you is, I think you can reply in the chat box. What are you advising your clients and how are you doing it? Have you told them to charge on the invoice basis, or you are telling it on the receipt basis, raise a debit note? You can please put your comments in the chat box. Let us make it very interactive. So I'm not going to say what is right or wrong. I think whatever you say will be right only. There are two options and both are right. But I want to know what all you prefer. Do you charge on the invoice, or you charge when you collect the amount and you raise a debit note? So I prefer a debit note rather than invoice. Okay, so Vinayji has told that he would prefer a debit note. Okay, Vinayji, I am with you. I would also prefer a debit note. I'll tell you the reason why. So I think now both the options are there. Now we have to take into account that a simple fact that this 50 lakh rupees limit is per year. It is not once a lifetime, it is per year. So if you have collected 50 lakhs for a particular customer in this year, from next year of April, you'll get the fresh limit of 50 lakhs. So there is no point of putting in the invoice and then creating a provision, then maybe reversing it next year. Simpler provision is raise a debit note. Whatever amount you receive on the same month, make a collection, make a debit note and pay it by the next of the month in the TCS collection. So I would also prefer a debit note because invoice would not be practically feasible in a lot of cases. So after this 29th September, the circular, there came a press release on 30th of September and they clarified a few more things. So as they clarified is, if TCS is applicable only on the amount received after 1st October. So they give an example, if suppose 1 crore received before 30th September, 5 lakh received on 1st October, then TCS will be on the amount of only 5 lakhs. It will not be on the amount of 55 lakhs or 1 crore 5 lakhs, whatever the case may be. Because before 30th September, you have already exhausted that limit of 50 lakhs. Now on 1st October, if you are receiving 5 lakhs, TCS will applicable only on 5 lakh rupees. That is a very important clarification they gave in. Second, they mentioned whether every transaction will attract TCS. So I think we got a lot of phone calls from our clients. Now their turnover was less than 10 crores, and they were getting panicked. Whether TCS, what to do. But I said, first, your turnover is, let's say, 8 crore, 9 crore, 7 crore. You are not under this provision. You need not collect TCS. So every transaction will not apply on the TCS. Second, only if the consideration that you receive is more than 50 lakhs. So normally people have the apprehension that whatever amount we get, just collect TCS. It is not like that. So twin threshold of 10 crores of your turnover and 50 lakhs of receipt of the customer, both are important. Now there was a question that mentioned that if suppose a seller is maintaining a running account, like suppose you are sold certain amount, you're getting part payment. What about that? In that case, they have mentioned that whatever amount you receive, inclusive of GST, that you have to see that for the purpose of TCS calculation. And they've clarified it's not an additional tax, it is an advanced tax, like a TDS, which you will be getting the credit. And they have mentioned that 3.5 lakh persons have disclosed turnover. So according to them, only 3.5 lakh persons have disclosed turnover of more than 10 crores in financial year 18-19, and 18 lakh entities already deal with TCS. So for them, it is not. They told it's not a much of an operational issue that people would face. So let us see how it's going to go ahead. So now coming on the FAQs, first is who is liable to collect TDS, tax on sale of goods. As we discussed, seller whose turnover in the previous financial year exceeds 10 crore. So for 2021, we have to see 1920 turnover. Second, whom shall tax be collected? So as I said, it has to be collected from the buyer, and the definition of buyer we discussed that apart from the from the central government, the local authority, even the person who is importing goods is not liable to collect TCS. Yes, you have discussed this. Now this is a question to all of you: whether goods imported in India will be exempt from TCS, even in a case where initial importers sell the goods to any person on high seas sales. So I think Visakhapatnam is one of the busiest ports in the country, and I'm sure a lot of these transactions would be happening in that part of the country. So high seas sales, whether TCS would be applicable? That's a simple question. Anybody would like to reply? Either yes or no. There are only two options. So. I think it may be right, wrong. I'm not going to question anything, but it's okay. So I just want to clarify, on a high seas sales, TCS will not be applicable. Now I'll say there's a person A, there's a person B, and person C. Now A is the main importer. Now before importing, he has sold it to Mr. B. Now Mr. B is the ultimate importer, right? Now when Mr. B is importing the goods, if you have seen the definition of purchaser, goods importing inside India is not a purchaser. It's not outside the definition of buyer. Hence, since he is not a buyer, TCS will not have to be collected. So very well answered by Prasant sir and Vasudev ma'am. I think very well answered. TCS will not be applicable. Now coming to timing, as I said, timing is the most important thing. It is on the receipt of the amount, irrespective of whenever you make sales. Now the questions come in: what if I have sold, let's say 1 crore before 30th of September, and I received, let's say 40 lakhs from October to March, whether TCS will have to be collected? The answer is no. Irrespective of whatever amount you sell, let's say 10 crore, 15 crore, doesn't matter. If you have received less than 50 lakhs, then TCS on sale will not be applicable. It is only on the receipt. It's irrespective of the amount of sale that you do. Now, coming to the next question. As I said, is a non-resident selling goods from outside India required to collect tax? The answer is no, because the person importing goods is outside the definition of buyer. Hence, TCS will not to be collected. As I said, what is the goods? Now, goods, as I said, Sale of Goods Act is what we have to see. Now, Sale of Goods Act means any movable property. So, the first question on the building, TCS will not be collected. Second, we have to see that if there is certain portion on which already TDS is charged, for example, even on immovable property, there is 194 IA. Hence, these kind of things are already out of definition of TCS on sale of goods. So this all, I think I'll share the presentation, so you will be having a lot of details that I have shared. Now, whether security transactions to stock exchanges shall be answerable to TCS. Now, again, this was clarified by the circular that no, if the transactions are through recognized stock exchange, in that case TCS will not have to be collected. Immovable property we have discussed, TCS is not to be collected. Motor vehicle we have discussed, from the dealer to the manufacturer, from manufacturer to the dealer, the answer is yes. Dealer to the customer, if it is not under 1F, then you have to see 50 lakh limit for the entire year, and accordingly TCS will have to be collected. Electricity, again for the electricity they have mentioned that if the electricity electricity is a goods, I think NTPC judgment is there again from your state, from the Andhra Pradesh state. There was a high judgment which says electricity is a goods. Now it was again clarified that though it is goods, if you are trading renewable energy certificates and energy saving certificates through power exchanges, again that is out of the scope of TCS, and that TCS will not be leviable. Fuel supply to non-resident airlines, again in the clarification they said any fuel supply to non-resident airlines will not be subject to TCS. Again, there is an exception that they have clarified through a circular. Now, okay, now another question that I would like to say for jewelry. So whether TCS will be applicable on sale of jewelry? As I said, there is any goods, the answer would be yes. Even if there is a jeweler who sells jewelry, TCS will be applicable on if the amount of exceeds 50 lakh rupees. Now, one question that I have in my mind, I think let us discuss that. If there is a buyer, let's say if there is a seller who is, let's say, a salaried person. Now he's having a salaried income, he's not having any business, but he has, let's say, he has sold certain personal jewelry, and that exceeds 50 lakh rupees. Whether TCS will have to be collected? I hope you got the question. I am a salaried person, and I'm getting a salary income, but I have sold my jewelry which exceeds 50 lakh of receipt in the current year. Whether I have to collect TCS? What would you advise to your client? Whether the client will have to collect TCS? So Rituji says no, Prashant sir says no, and I think yes, the answer would be no, because since you are not a seller, again, you are not a seller because you are not fulfilling the definition of seller. Now going to another reverse case, position. I am a seller. I have a manufacturing unit. My turnover is more than 10 crores in the previous year, but there are certain personal jewelry that I am selling. Whether I have to collect TCS if the amount of receipt exceeds 50 lakhs for that personal jewelry? I got the question. I am a seller. I am a manufacturer basically. I am a manufacturer and I have my turnover of more than 10 crores in the previous year. TCS on sales is applicable. But I am also a proprietor and I have a personal jewelry which I am selling and the amount exceeds 50 lakh rupees. So Rituji says again no. Kumar sir says no. Okay. Anybody has a yes? So I would like to support them if you have a yes answer to that. So I think majority would be having a no to reply to this, and even I had a no reply. But when I went to the definition of seller, I had one apprehension, and that is what I wanted to share with you. That obviously the answer would be no, but if you read at the exact section, I'll just take you to the section now. Just a minute. If you go to the definition of seller. So what about the definition? If there is a person who receives, who is a seller who receives a consideration for sale of any goods, so they have not restricted goods to only your business goods. So they are not saying that which has been sold during the course of a business profession. What they are saying is any goods. Hence, I think CBDT should come up with a clarification that goods of a personal nature or goods sold on a capacity as a proprietor on a personal level should be out of the scope of it. But till that time, I think if you go by the definition of seller of the section, if he's a seller, he receives for any goods. In that case, in my view, TCS might trigger. I think I hope you got this view. I'm sure people will be having different interpretation for this, but that is what I take on that. Just a minute. Okay, so Rituji, I think questions will take once I collect, complete my presentation on TCS, then we'll take the TCS questions. So coming to the next point now straight away, I'll just go ahead what I've covered already. Yes. So now next question is resale. We have discussed resale. Obviously, TCS will be applicable. Whether additional allied and out-of-pocket expenses will form part of sale consideration. So at times what happened, we bill the client, we add insurance, we add freight charges, we add transportation handling charges. So whether they will form part of the sale consideration. So again, my view would be that if you have a single bill wherein you have the sale of goods plus other expenses plus GST charge on the same invoice and you receive a consideration for that invoice, then TCS will have to be collected on the entire amount. However, if you have a separate billing, in that case, yes, you can take a view that these are the services, they are not the goods. Hence, in that case, TCS will not be applicable. So it all depends upon which kind of accounting method you follow. Talking about the accounting method, I think even for the turnover definition, now whether turnover would be inclusive of GST or exclusive of GST, I would always go by the institute guidance note, which has very clearly clarified that if you are following an exclusive method of accounting, exclusive meaning that if you are having the entire P&L account outside GST, for example, if you have sales excluding GST, purchases excluding GST, and the GST is only a balance sheet item wherein you have a plus and minus and you have a net payable and net receivable. In that case, the turnover will not include GST. It will only be the turnover without the GST amount. However, if you are following an inclusive method of accounting, wherein everything is inclusive of GST or sales, purchases, expenses, in that case, the turnover will be inclusive of GST, and accordingly, the 10 crore limit will have to be calculated. At what rate tax is to be collected? Tax is to be collected at 0.1% of the amount of receipt. Now that 0.1% has been relaxed for the current year because of the COVID. The rate is now 0.075% for the current year up to March, and then the rate will be 1%. Now, from which date the threshold limit will be computed? We have already discussed. From 1st April, the threshold limit of 50 lakhs. 1st April 2020, the threshold limit will be computed. We already discussed that. Okay. As I discussed, TCS included on the total invoice value, including GST. The answer is yes. TCS will have to be collected on the entire receipt amount. Okay. Now the biggest question: whether TCS has to be collected on advance receipt from the buyer. So I'll give you a practical example now. Now, in the month of October, let's say in the month of February, I received an advance of 85 lakhs. In today's time, getting an advance is a big thing, so I will be happy. So in month of February, I received an advance of 85 lakhs, and the sale bill, my actual movement of goods, and the sale bill happens in the month of April 21. Now, whether I have to collect TCS in the financial year 2021, that is in the month of February, or once the sale is booked in the month of April, that is the question. I hope the question is clear, and I think I would like to know your answers on that. So Vinayji says February, Rituji says February, TCS applicable amount received, okay. So irrespective if the sale doesn't happen in the same financial year, even in that case, on the advance also the TCS will have to be collected. The meaning is that. Okay, so I think majority, I will go by the majority. Yes, the TCS will have to be collected in the month of February only, because irrespective of sales, it is collected on the amount received. Hence, February TCS will have to be collected. I think Rituji has a question. I'll just take it because we are linking that only. So she says that if there are multiple goods in business and multiple goods are being sold to same party, so TCS has to be, it's not collected goods wise or on all. So basically, irrespective of goods or whatever, it is customer wise. Even if you're selling multiple goods to a same customer, you have to see the limit of 50 lakhs from that customer. If that amount of collection of 50 lakh amount received exceeds 50 lakhs, then TCS will have to be collected. We don't have to bifurcate like particular goods 50 lakhs, particular goods not 50 lakhs. No, it has to be seen on a buyer to buyer basis, seller to buyer basis, and not goods wise. I hope that was clear, Rituji. If you have anything, you can just let me know in the chat box. So advance, as I said, yes, TCS has to be collected on advance. Now another question on advance is, suppose I have received advance from 1st April to 30th September. Let's say in the month of July, I got 90 lakhs advance. Sale happened in the month of October. In that case, TCS will not be collected because the amount is received before October, even if the sale happens after October. So I hope this is clear. For advance, there are two scenarios. If you have received advance after 1st October and sales happens anytime, TCS will have to be collected provided 50 lakhs threshold is met. And second, if you have received advance from 1st April till 30th September, sales happen after 30th September, no amount is received after 30th September, in that case TCS will not be collected, even if the amount is advance received before that. These are two important clarifications on the advance. Now, as I said, whether advance received before 1st October for sale of goods to be made after that date be subject to TCS, the answer would be no, because TCS, again, there is no receipt after 1st October. Now, whether amount received as loan, so what time, at times you also get some amount as loan from the buyer. Now, whether that loan amount will attract TCS, again the answer would be no, because it is only on the receipt of sales consideration and loan is not a sales consideration. Now, whether tax to be collected on transfer of goods from one branch to another, again no, because the same person, hence we have to just ignore that. Credit note we have discussed, multiple we have discussed. Okay, now next question. Whether low deduction can be obtained for TCS on sale of goods. Any of your client has insisted on that, on getting a low deduction or no deduction for the TCS collection? I think they will say that, you know, at such it is 0.1% only, it is very less amount. Why will they go for no deduction? So, but the answer also lies, even if okay, so Gautam ji has a question that outstanding as on 31st of March is 1 crore. Payment from 1st April. Okay. So now a very valid question, Gautam ji. Even if the outstanding, even if you received amount of your sales before 2, 3, 4 years, you know, bad debts, if there are bad debts, you're getting bad debts recovered, or if you have an opening outstanding balance, or if you have sold before 2 years and you're getting the amount now, irrespective of anything, if you are receiving certain amount after 1st October and the amount exceeds 50 lakhs in that financial year, TCS will have to be collected. So your outstanding of 1 crore on 31st of October, 31st of March, and you're getting, let's say, payment from 1st April. So you have to see how much you get before 30th of September, and then accordingly TCS will have to be collected from 1st of October. So even on the outstanding, yes, TCS will be applicable. So load deduction, deduction collection of TCS is not there. So there is section 206C subsection 9, which says that load deduction of TCS can be applicable, can be sought for under section only under the subsection 1 and 1C, that is basically dealing with the timber, tendu leaves, and the toll plaza, and that we saw in the beginning. It is 206C does not cover 1H. So for this, you cannot apply for load collection of TCS. You know, as such, the rate is low. And I think the only objective of putting in the TCS provisions for this is maybe that the government has to do some data mining, because I don't get any other logic of, you know, because these provisions are these kind of companies or buyers will always be covered under GST. If you have 50 lakhs of sales or 20 lakhs of sales, GST will always be there. But the only thing is they wanted to have some data mining, some data linking, or whatever they want to do. They want to create a 360-degree profile. Hence, provisions of TCS were introduced. Now, how to deposit TCS? Very simple, like the way you do TDS every month. Next month, 7 date before 7 of the next month, you deposit TCS through a challan. Now, again, due date of deposit 7th of the next month. Again, if you fail to pay TCS, the same as TDS, you have to pay interest at 1.5%, and you also have that if you don't file TCS returns. So TCS returns are again quarterly. So I'll show you. This is a quarterly dates. So normally TDS is 31st of the next end of the quarter. Next month of 31st is there. For example, for the quarter of 30th September, we have 31st October as the TDS date. For TCS, it is 15th of the next quarter. So our first return will come on 15th January. That is October to December quarter will be 15th of January. Before that, we'll have to collect TCS return. Now, since we are discussing so much on TCS, I just want to know your view on what do you foresee, what kind of TCS returns will be there, because as of now, as we stand today, as I speak today, TCS returns have not been revised. So 27 EQ is still the same, but I'm sure TCS returns are going to be revised. So what do you think? What will be the features which the government would want to capture if they want to have more information on TCS? So anybody would like to throw a light on that? I'm not going to recommend anything. I'm not going to convey anything. But I just want to share as a professionals, what do you think? Because I have certain thoughts which I think might come in. So if you have any thoughts, we can discuss, and we can maybe prepare our clients in advance. So what do you think? Anything specific that the government will ask for, or only government will ask for the whatever amount you received, pay 0.075% and declare? Will it be that simple? Anybody would like to just think about it? It's always good to interact with professionals. We can think and we can have our own opinions. So GST and PAN may be okay. Okay, GST is a good option. PAN also, yeah. PAN so already we have to give as such. PAN we have to give. So Sagarji replies GST and PAN. Okay. So okay, now what I think is that I would foresee something like this. If suppose there should be opening debtors, there should be sales made during this quarter, amount received should be deducted, and the closing debtors. And the amount received, you have to collect TCS on that amount. Now, if we do this, you see how much things will be captured. Opening debtors, what are there on the opening of the quarter? It will be freeze, you cannot change it, it will be frozen. Second, sales made during that quarter. Again, that will be linked to the GST. You have to see whether the figures are matching. Third, you're deducting the amount of receipt. So receipt on that you have to pay 0.075%, and the closing becomes the opening of the next month. So if you track the entire debtors this way, you can see your books are basically finalized every debtors and cash and everything is fixed every quarter. So something like this might come in. I don't know, but let us see if it's not that harsh. It should be a little simpler than what I have just told you right now. But in case this comes up, please don't blame me. I'm not the person who's suggesting them. I'm just deliberating what can come in. So with this, I think TCS and so if you don't file TCS return like we have for TDS, 200 rupees per day penalty, the late fees, it is still there for TCS also. So yes. So apart from this, if you have any questions on the TCS, before I go on to the next topic, we can cover those questions. So how are things there? I think people have started complying with these provisions and all, using debit notes and everybody. And so anyone has a question on TCS on sale of goods, or if we can move ahead to the next topic. I'm not seeing any other question in the chat box. I think in Rituji, I have one question from you. Yeah, that's okay.
Members, if you are comfortable in typing in the chat box, you can unmute yourself and ask the speaker directly.
Absolutely. I think we all are virtually connected, and we can all be, having the advantage of discussing. So maybe I'll wait for a minute and then I can go to the next topic. Sorry?
Sir, I have small doubt. The product may comes under the in the definition of goods and goods under the GST Act, but if it is an exempted product, whether TCS is applicable.
Okay. So good question on the exempted product. So that exemption and all those things are relating to the GST Act. It is not linked to the Income Tax Act. Income tax, there is no exception as such. So if you're, let's say, selling a 100% exempted product, you might not be required to take a GST registration, but then there is no exception here and TCS will have to be collected.
Thank you, sir.
So any other question? So I'll just take one question from what you had asked for. So is 100% exempt turnover, whether tax audit will be applicable? If you say a yes, I'll go to the next topic, otherwise we'll close it. 100% exempt receipt, whether tax audit will be applicable?
Yes.
And if it's turnover of more than 1 crore. And the answer would obviously be yes, but there is a contrary judgment also of magnum opus, that is a different thing, but answer will be yes, and the tax audit will be applicable. With this, I think let us go to the next topic. And even if you have any questions on TCS, you can post it in the chat box, and we can take it at the end of the session. So on the tax audit, now coming to tax audit now. So what is the tax audit? Now I know it's a very, very simple question, but I would like to ask all of you, what is a tax audit? I think most of us are doing tax audit. So what, according to you, would be tax audit? Anything that comes to your mind?
Now you ask the question, everybody will be asking only one question, whether it will be extended or not.
I know. That is the biggest thing that everybody is asking for. I and I think multiple representations have gone in also for this thing from our state. I'm a part of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry here. We have done it. Institute is doing it. Now let us see how it comes in. So Vinayji replies that audit under 44 AB. So yeah, so normally when you talk about tax audit, we all have a simple perception that tax audit is checking of all the income tax. Okay, so Rituji is giving a very good definition. It talks about checking of all the income tax compliance is done by the SSC. Now, if you see the Income Tax Act, there is no word as tax audit. There is no specific section of tax audit. So normally we have kind of a generalized thing that 44 AB is tax audit. That is what we think about. But but all these sections which I'm going to mention now, these are sections you can see here now. Just a minute. Yeah. So audit under section 10, audit under 10A, 12A, 44AB, 80IA, IB, IC, ID, even 80JJAA, LA. All these audits are tax audits because they all are under the Income Tax Act and they all are known as tax audit. But in a very common parlance, as we normally talk, we say that 44AB is a tax audit. So we will now take further on that. So before I go on to the topic, some time for some introspection as professionals. That I'll straight away go through that. You have to reply to this. Maybe if you don't reply, just think about that. So do you accept tax audit assignments on 27th of September and finalize the same by 30th of September? So you can read September as October, November as you think the date will be extended. Do you accept and do it in 3 days? That is the first thing we have to ponder as a chartered accountant. Does your client prepare financial statements and hand over before the audit process commences? So normally what happens, your financial statements are there in front of you and then you process the audit. Does it happen that way? I don't know. Whether you have to think about yourself. If the audit points out errors affecting profitability, does your client pass adjustment entries to ensure that the profit figures do not change? Again, time to ponder. Do you maintain books of accounts of your client as well as conduct the audit? I hope majority would be saying no. All should be saying no. And do you actually conduct the following activity as part of your audit? First is conduct the audit. Actually, to conduct, for example, is non-corporate coming on the last day. I don't know how do you conduct audit. You first audit the books of accounts, then see the balance sheets. Ensuring compliance and disclosures as per AS accounting standards. Now, since we are all professional forum, I think we should know that compliances as AS accounting standards, Ind AS are applicable, or even ICDS are very important. Now, I have seen so many tax audit reports wherein ICDS is not mentioned. Just a common copy-paste note is mentioned. That should not be done as a professional. And ensuring compliance with income tax. So these are all the activities which we have to ponder, and as a professional we have to now start doing. And why I'm saying so, because I want to mention about a very important report of the CNAG. I don't know if most of you are aware of this or not, but there was a report of 2015 of CNAG, wherein they have done, what they have done is basically they have done audit of the tax audit reports of the chartered accountants. So whatever tax audit reports we have issued, they have audited that, they have gone through it, and whatever the loopholes or the compliance issues or whatever we had, they have mentioned those. And I'll take you to main important parts. So you can see here, they have reported, this report is there in the public domain. Tax auditors failed to give correct information related to allowance of depreciation in 66 cases, involving short levy of 457 crores. Similarly, brought forward losses were wrongly computed, personal capital expenditure were incorrectly allowed. Now, various exemptions were given where actually the exemption criteria was not getting fulfilled, or incorrect, incomplete information in certificates for tax audit reports. So these are all the reports that were compiled, and the more shocking feature is that they have basically given the sample size. Now, I'll give you a few illustrations of what can go wrong. Now, they have given the name of the CA and everything they have mentioned here. Now, I just read the comment. The SSC claimed additional depreciation of 11 crore on plant and machinery based on the tax audit report, which was disallowed by the AO as the activity of construction could not be treated as manufacturing activity. Now, obviously, we all know that construction does not amount to manufacture and the additional depreciation should not be there. But let's say some of our articles or our office staff, somebody by through oversight would have done this, and 11 crore would have been done as an additional depreciation. Now, these are all things they are getting noticed and they are getting reported. So we have to be very careful. Now, again, a very, very vague comment I would read here is that the tax auditor had mentioned that we have broadly verified the payments on which tax are to be deducted at source, while the SSC has mostly complied with the law, but due to volume of transactions, we are not in a position to confirm that tax has been deducted wherever applicable. Hence, we recommend an ad hoc disallowance of 5 lakh. Now, These are such a vague thing, and these are all the big balance sheets, big tax audit reports that have been filed. So these kind of comments which the auditors have been making, now it is being published in the public domain. So we have to be very careful, and we have to be very, very careful. So these are a few examples wherein, you know, a TDS was not deducted, hence and even though the expense was allowed, or certain amounts were disallowed in the ITR but not mentioned in the tax audit report. So these are things were there which were to be reported. So now we have to be very careful, and more so now, because I think you all must be aware that Taxation Audit Quality Review Board has been set up now by ICAI. So there was a Quality Review Board, QRB, which basically dealt with the financial instruments or financial statements of the listed companies and big large corporates. Now, apart from the company and the compliance issues and the statutory audit, they have a Taxation Audit Quality Review Board which will be reviewing the tax audit reports of the big companies to start with, and then the other companies also. So we have to be very specific and very clear now with the provisions. Now there are two important things. One is the guidance note on the tax audit, which is issued by the again you can see tax audit under section 44AB. This is a very revised, very good version. Second is the implementation guide. These are the two books that we should have, and we are doing the tax audit reports. Very, very useful compilation. Now coming to the applicable questions. If you have any questions, I'm just seeing. So I think there's a question. No, not at all. Okay. Okay. So coming to the applicability of section. So again, a few questions to all of you, and I expect answers in the chat box now. So D, started manufacturing. First year turnover is 6 crore. Net profit is 15 lakhs. And total income is 18.5 lakhs. Whether tax audit will be applicable. You know, it's a time wherein, you know, D, K, all these short forms are very much famous because of the WhatsApp messages and the thing that we're seeing on television. But so what will be your applicable? Whether tax will be applicable? D, started manufacturing. First year turnover is 6 crores. Net profit is 15 lakhs. Total income is 18.5 lakhs. Whether tax audit will be applicable? And under which section? Okay, so mostly all saying yes. Okay. Okay, so it's comparatively a simpler question, and everybody have a right answer. Now coming to the second question. K started manufacturing. First year turnover is 175 lakhs. That is 1 crore 75 lakhs. Net profit is 8 lakhs. Whether tax audit, and total income is 8.5 lakhs. Whether tax audit will be applicable? Whether they can go for 44 AD or AB? Whether they can go for 44 AD. So I think audit is always done on 44 AB. You know, whether you read it with 44 AD or ADA or whatever, it is already done, always done in section 44 AB. So in this case, whether do you think audit will be there? So Bharti ji says 44 AD. You have an option of going for AD. Okay. So 175 lakhs. So assuming 8%, it comes to around 14 lakhs. So you are showing a net profit of less than 14 lakhs. So whether you have to do audit, and we will ponder about these questions later on. We get the answers later on. Third, now this is Mr. R. He is having a turnover of 90 lakh rupees. Net profit of 10 lakh rupees. He is a doctor, and the doctor fees of 45 lakhs. Net profit of 25 lakhs from doctor receipt. The question is very simple. Can he go for 44 AD for his trading business, which is having a 10 turnover of 90 lakhs? Okay, so Kumar says there is no. Okay, sir, why no? I will discuss all the answers, but why no on this question? Why a doctor cannot go for 44 AD? It is not only professional fees. Okay, sir, this is basically professional fees is 45 lakhs is separate, which will be covered under 44 ADA, and he's having a turnover of 90 lakhs, which is can't he go to 44 AD for that business?
Property concern మొత్తం కలిపి ఒక దాంట్లోకి వస్తుంది కదా, అప్పుడు then he can't go for it.
Okay, so
Sure. Um,
Yes. So one of the thought is that professional cannot go for 44 AD. Okay. SSC specific. Okay. Okay. No, but in that case, if okay, I got your SSC specific. Okay. We will discuss this. I'm just giving you food of thought now. Now, next question coming in. We will discuss all the questions separately. Mr. A has a trading turnover of 80 lakhs. His net profit is 4 lakhs. Whether he has to go for AD or he can just avoid the audit. Whether he has to do the audit or not, that is the question. So Gangaraju ji says 44 AD and ADA for the above question. Okay. So we will discuss that, Gangaraju ji. We will discuss that. So talking about the next question, Mr. A is having a trading turnover of 80 lakhs. Net profit is 4 lakhs. Total income is 3 lakhs. Whether he has to do audit under 44AD or he has the option of just not doing anything, just filing the ITR as it is. These are all the real life examples that we might be facing in now, or we'll be getting it in the month to come. Anybody for this? Whether audit is to be done or not, can opt for 44AD or go for 44AB. Okay. Kumar sir says can opt for 44AD or go for AB. Okay. Right. So the last question before you go on to the provisions. So Gangaraju says depends upon on previous year return. Okay, very well said, Gangaraju. We will discuss that also. And last, my trading turnover is 95 lakhs. Commission is 6 lakhs. Net profit is 15 lakhs. Total income is 14 lakhs. Whether I have to go for AD, AB, or I can go for section 44 AD, that is the presumptive income, or I have to compulsory go for 44 AB audit, subclause A. So commission, no AD. Okay, very rightly said by Bharti. Commission, so you cannot go for 44 AD. It is out of it. So you have to see 95 plus 6, 1 crore, 1 lakh. Whether tax will be applicable or not, that we have to check. So very rightly said by your chairperson. So now these are the few questions, and I'm sure with the kind of discussion that we're going to have now, you'll be getting the answers of all the 6 now. So coming to tax audit, I think I'll skip the introductory part. I think we all are aware of it, but I just want to take you to the important part on the. This is how tax audit came in. So basically, we all know that in 1984 the tax audit was introduced for the first time, much before I was born. I think most of the participants were born. So in 1997, 4480 was introduced. Then in 1999, all the forms and rule 6G was revised. Then you can see the entire gradual transformation till 2013. 2013 was a big, kind of a revolutionary thing wherein tax audit of e-filing the tax audit was made mandatory. So if you can see during the period 2008, wherein the requirement to furnish the report was done away with, till 2013, for 5 years, there was no requirement to give or upload or submit tax audit report. We just had to keep it with ourselves, and and we all know how the tax audit reports were made. But in 2013, a very welcome step of e-filing tax audit reports was made mandatory. And in 2014, major revision was there in tax audit report. You can see 18 clauses modified, 7 new clauses added, 41 clauses were there in 2014. And then 2018, again they modified, and hence you can see in 2014 there was a guidance note, and in 2018 there was an implementation guide. And right now there are 44 clauses, out of which 2 have been deferred. So if you say about the GST reporting or the GAR provisions, they've been deferred for another year, and there are 42 effective clauses in the tax audit report. Schema keeps on changing. I think every other day we have a new schema for tax audit report, and we have to be very specific on which we are uploading the same. So limits, this is how gradually they have evolved. So when we were studying, it was somewhere 60 lakhs, 15 lakhs. Now it is 1 crore. And so if you see now currently, the limit is 1 crore for business, 50 lakhs for profession. But that 1 crore comes with a condition, and that is what we're going to discuss now. So this, I think you can skip this thing. So what we are going to discuss, 44AB, we are going to discuss the 5 subclauses of 44AB. The business, profession, deemed income, deemed profession income, and 44AD subsection 4. We will discuss rule 6G, which talks about the forms. of 40 or audit under 44AB. 3CA is for report in case of a person who is required to get his accounts audited under any law. So when I talk about 3CA, now first question comes to my mind: what about LLP? If I have to audit under LLP or RERA or GST or any other law for the time being in force, I have to issue a report in form 3CA. We have to be very careful. 3CB, reporting any other case. If suppose you are not liable for audit under any other case, then you have to issue form 3CB. 3CD, as you know, there are particulars are required to be submitted along with the audit report. Now these particulars are to be given by the client. They have to be certified by the client. We just have to verify it and certify it. And there's a penalty for non-filing of tax audit report. So coming to section, so subsection 44AB subclause A says every person carrying on business, if his total sale exceeds 1 crore rupees in previous year, will have to get the tax audit report done. Now in the Finance Act 2020, two provisos were introduced, and both of them are effective from assessment year 2021, that is from financial year 1920. So the audits which we are doing right now for the last year, these provisions are very much applicable. So first is, if the aggregate of all amounts received, including amount received for sales, turnover or gross receipts during the previous year in cash, does not exceed 5% of the said amount. I hope you got this, that aggregate of all amounts received, including received for sales. So it's not only sales, turnover, anything that you receive, including sales, turnover, gross receipts during the previous year, and you have to compare with what are the cash receipts. And if the cash receipts does not exceed 5%, that is the clause A. Subclause B talks about similarly for payments, aggregate of all payments made, including amount incurred for expenditure. So it does not talk about only purchases, only raw materials or everything. It talks about any payments, even capex payments, payments to your vendors, whatever payments you have done, you have to segregate the total payments to the cash payments, and the cash payments does not exceed 5%. If both the conditions are fulfilled, in that case, the 1 crore limit will be substituted by 5 crores. So I'll give you a simple example. Normally we all will be facing. There is a trader who is having a turnover of, let's say, 3.5 to 4 crores. And every year he used to get books of accounts audited by us. Now this year, when he comes to us, we just can't blindly do the tax audit. We have to see whether this 5% limit is fulfilled. If the amount is full, if the category is fulfilled, then for him the limit will be 5 crores, and hence he will not be subject to tax audit. Now the question is, even if I want to do tax audit, can I do it? Like, is the tax audit optional? Like, if I want to do it, I can do it. If I don't want to do it, I don't do it. Is it optional in that sense? What is your view on that? So what would you say to your client who is having a 3.5 to 4 crores income and is fulfilling his conditions, whether you will audit the books of accounts? I think clients are also very smart. They know about the provisions. They know more about the provisions than what we know. So optional to the client. So Sagarji replies, I think he's replied privately. Okay. Sagarji replies optional to the client. Okay. Anybody else? So in my view, it is not optional to the client. The client, so I'll tell you the repercussions. If there's a loss, and if you file a tax audit report and you elongate the return date, this year everything is 30th November, but from next year the main return will be 31st July. Audited ones will be 30th of September, 31st of October. So by doing a tax audit report, you are basically buying more time and getting the amount loss carried forward. Second, there's a late filing fees of 5,000, 10,000 as the case may be, that will also be leviable to you. So it is not optional. If you're not subject to tax audit, you should not do the tax audit. And these provisions are very important because you have to calculate on per client basis. So I'll tell you how we are doing it. So this is a simple calculation that what sheets we are using it. We can have the total receipts here like this. Total receipts, capital bifurcated to revenue, both receipts will be there. Then out of that, next slide will be the cash portion of it. So total receipts, cash receipts, calculate the percentage of it, whether it exceeds 5% or not. That is the first thing. Second, similarly, total payments. So whether you pay for share buyback or investments or whatever payments you make, give loans and advances, everything, revenue expenditure for purchases, for salary payments, and whatever expenses you make, take out the cash portion out of it separately. What is the cash payment you have made? So basically you have to deal with the entire receipts and payments account of the company, the cash book and the bank book. Accordingly, you have to deal with it. And if both the conditions are fulfilled, then tax audit will not have to be done. So this is a major thing that we are seeing in the subclause A. Clause B, we all know, is very simple for profession. If the amount exceeds 50 lakhs, we will be subject to tax audit. Clause C talks about presumptive taxation. So if you are under 44 AE, we talks about the hiring, flying or leasing of goods carriage. 44 AB talks about non-resident business for exploration of mineral oil or foreign company with civil construction. In that case, if you show the income less than the amount presumptive income and your total income exceeds the maximum not chargeable to tax, in that case, the amount that you have to get the tax rate under 44 subclause C. Now subclause D, it talks about profession. As you know, 44 ADA, if you are a profession, you have to show minimum 50% of your receipt as your income. If you show less than that, in that case, tax rate will have to be done under section 44 subclause 44 AB subclause D. Now the question which comes to professional, first question that I want to ask is, if I am a professional, and my turnover is 47 lakhs, and I have 6 lakhs of amount as a reimbursement that the client has given me. Maybe I have paid GST on account of my client, or I have paid some out of pocket expenses, the client is reimbursing me, whatever. 47 lakhs is my receipts, 6 lakhs is my reimbursement amount. Now, whether I have to consider 53 lakhs and then do a compulsory audit, or I have to remain in 47 lakhs and I can take the benefit of 44 ADA. That is the question. So Prashant sir says yes, yes, as in you should be considering 53 lakhs or 47 lakhs. You got the question? So total is 53 lakhs. Okay. So Prashant sir will be then compulsorily doing the audit, 53 lakhs and compulsory audit. Okay. Anybody of the different view? That no, receipt will be only 47 and 6 is a mere reimbursement or GST payment, whatever it may be. So all agree with Prashant sir. I think it's good to be in office bearership in Visakhapatnam. Everybody agrees to you. So in my view, I think your total receipts will be 47 lakhs. It will not be 53 lakhs because I think there's a very important provision or a kind of a principle which talks about the diversion of income by overriding title. So the 6 lakhs that you received is not your income. You have just received it because you have made some payment on behalf of a client. You are a trustee for that amount. So if you have paid certain amount as a trustee for your client, that will not be considered as your receipt. So receipt will be 47 lakhs only, and 6 lakhs will not be considered. So hence you can go to 44 ADA, but you need not get the books of accounts audited under section 44 AB subclause B. Now coming to very important clause which E talks about the subsection 4 of 44 AD. So if you are carrying on a business and if you fall under subsection 4 of 44 AD, which you are going to see now, and your income does not exceed the maximum amount not chargeable to tax, in that case tax audit will be done under clause E. Now I think before I go on to 44 AD, my first question to all of you is a very simple question, and I hope most of you would be answering that. Is that suppose your turnover is 95 lakhs and you show net profit of less than 8% or 6%, whether you will get the books of accounts audited, and you are in the first year of business. I hope you got the question. So it's the first year of business and you are having a turnover of 95 lakhs and you are showing profit of less than 8% or less than 6%, whether you will be subject to tax audit. So Bhartiji says yes, if less than 8%, yes audit. Kumarji says yes. Okay. It's the first year of business and there's no earlier, that 44 AD or 44 AD, whatever you've done, earlier cases not to be seen. So again, the chairperson says yes, and Kumar sir also says yes. Any other view? Anybody would like to say a no? I'll give you with proper justification if the answer is yes or correct or not. Yeah. Okay. Anybody with a no? I think you can just mention if the answer is no. I'll be able to support you in that sense. So as Bharti said or as Kumar sir said, there is a normal perception for that everyone of us has that even if it's a first year of business, if he's showing a turnover of less than 1 crore, like let's say 95 lakhs, and if the profit is shown 8%, do the audit. The answer in my case would be the audit is not applicable. Now I'll tell you why. Because in budget 2016, so there are two things: budget 2016 and pre-budget 16. So in budget 2016, they amended the section 44AB, and what they've done in clause E, you can see here, they've given a reference of subsection 4 of 44AD. So earlier, there was a reference of subsection 1 of 44AD. So if you will read the budget 2015, in that case, clause E was not there, clause D was there, but carrying on the business is a provision of subsection 1 of 44AD are applicable. Now they have substituted by subsection 4. So we will discuss why 1 and why 4 and what are the implications. But the answer here would be audit is not applicable, and we will see now why. We are now moving straight away to section 44AD. So section 44AD. So what does subsection 1 talks about? 1 says that if you are having a business, and if you are having a turnover of less than 2 crores, then you have to show 8% or 6% of your turnover as a profit. That is what subsection 1 says. Now, if had it been budget 15 or earlier, your answer was right. That it was, if you are showing less than 8%, the answer is right, and hence you are subject to tax audit. But let us see what is subsection 4 now. Subsection 2 says that whatever deduction will be deemed to be allowed. Subsection 3 says WDV will be deemed to be calculated, like depreciation will be deemed to be allowed. Now, what does subsection 4 say? Subsection 4 says that if there is an eligible SSC which declares profit for any previous year in accordance with this section, and declares profit for any of the 5 assessment years relevant to the previous year, succeeding the previous year, not in accordance with this provision, then he shall not be liable to give the benefit of this provision for 5 years. So in a simple manner, suppose in the financial year 18-19, I had taken a benefit of 4480. I have shown 8%. Next year 19-20, I violated, I showed less than 8%, I get the books of accounts audited. Now including that year, further 5 years, I cannot take the benefit of section 4480. I cannot go back to the 6% or 8%. I have to have a compulsory audit. So this subsection 4 is what is getting referred in 44AB, is now dealing with this. It does not deal with the first year wherein you are not subject to, where you are having a turnover less than 1 crore. In that case, no need to do the books of accounts audited. Only when you have violated the subsection 4, in the sense 44AD in 1 year, you go for 44AB, that is less than 6% in the next year. Then the next 5 years, including that year and further 5 years, you cannot go to 44AD. You have to get the books of accounts compulsory audited, and that audit will be under subsection E, subclause E of 44AB. I hope this is clear. And the subsection 5 says that yes, if the subsection 4, you're following subsection 4, and in the sense you are also having an income less than the maximum non-chargeable tax, you will be having the books of accounts audited. I hope now this is clear that Bharti and Kumarji, I hope the answer is now no for you also. Okay, now coming to the next question, which talks about the next point, very important point, subsection 6. It talks that the provisions of subsection 44AD will not be applicable to 3 persons: person carrying on profession, as referred to in subsection 1 of 44AA, person earning income in the nature of commission or brokerage, and the person carrying on any agency business. So when I asked you a question whether a doctor having his own professional receipts and he's having a pharmaceutical shop wherein he sells his medicines, can he opt for 44AD for his pharmaceutical business and 44ADA for his personal professional fees? So as you say, for the personal professional fees, he can go for 44ADA. But since the person carrying on profession, 44ADA is not applicable. It's not applicable to the person. So that person, that doctor, cannot go for 44AD for his pharmaceutical shop. Similarly, if you're running a commission income, brokerage, and if you're having another business, in that case, you cannot take the benefit of 44AD for any business because it is specific to the person. I hope this is clear again. I think it's very difficult to interact when you don't see people as just talking to yourself. So I hope it is clear. If you have any doubts, please raise it in the chat box. And the eligible business here means the business except 44AE, and also if your turnover does not exceed 2 crores. So if your turnover exceeds 2 crores, you're out of 44 AD. Now 44 ADA, as I said, it's a very for us basically for any resident professionals. If you are showing, if you are having a turnover of less than 50 lakh rupees, gross receipts of less than 50 lakh rupees, and if you are showing an income of less than 50%, in that case you will have to compulsory get the books of accounts audited under section 44 subclause D. So that is a very simple section of 44 AD, and we discuss on the even on the amount that is received as a trustee. We discuss that also. So you can see here AD subsection 4 talks about the if you show an income lower than 44 ADA, in that case a compulsory audit will have to be done. So far any issues that we are seeing, any confusion that you have on tax audit, or we go for further questions? Anything that you want to ask for 44 AB, AD or ADA, as the case may be? Okay, so I assuming that everybody is either getting what I'm saying, so it's okay. So coming to now the four scenarios. If a turnover is below 1 crore, then nothing to be done. If your income is below 1 crore, in that case, no need to do the books of accounts audit. Again, you have to see the subsection 4 of 44 AD, whether last year there was compulsory audit or not. Then accordingly you have to take a decision. If your income is 1 crore to 2 crores, then you have to see 44 AD. Red with 44 AD, whether you will be applicable, the thing will be applicable there or not. If your income is between 1 to 5 crores, then you have to see the 44 AB and the recent proviso, whether 5% threshold limit is getting fulfilled or not. And of course, if you're having a turnover of more than 5 crores, then nothing to worry, you have to compulsorily get the books of accounts audited. Above 5 crores is very simple, nothing to be done. So with this, I think there are a few exceptions that I think I'll share the screen. So as I said, this is an extract of the guidance note, which says that whatever method of accounting you follow, let's say for the inclusive or exclusive, accordingly turnover will have to be calculated. So if you follow an exclusive method of accounting, GST will not be included. But if you follow an inclusive method, GST will have to be included for the purpose of turnover. Now, a very important two sections which I would like to discuss in brief: section 115 BAA and BAB. And why I'm going to discuss in brief is because in the new tax audit report, you would have seen additional columns getting added because of these two sections. So what are these two sections? 115 BAA and BBB. I think we have seen that last year Taxation Laws Amendment Act was first ordinance was released in September, then Act was brought in December, wherein there was an alternate taxation regime given to the corporates. So there were two booster packages. First, for the existing companies, they have an option of going for a tax rate of 22% without MAT, but subject to not claiming a lot of incentives and exemptions. There was section 115 BAA. And here there was a compulsory surcharge of 10% and education charge of 4%. And second option for the new manufacturing companies set up on or after 1st October 2019, they have an option of a lower tax rate of 15% without MAT. So in both these sections, there is no MAT. However, we will be losing all the exemptions, incentives that were mentioned there. Especially applicable to us would be additional depreciation, and if there is any MAT credit. These are two major things that we have to see as a normal companies. So you can see this is what is the comparison. So if your turnover for last year is less than 17 is less than 400 crores, existing company will be 25% and 30%, and surcharge will be applicable only if your income exceeds that 1 crore or 10 crores. However, if you go for the new provisions for 115 BAA, it is 20%, 22%, 115 BAB is 15%, and surcharge is 10% irrespective of your income. So surcharge will be there irrespective of whatever the income. Even if your income of 1 lakh, surcharge will be leviable. So the effective tax rate will be coming to 25.17. 22 plus 10 plus 4 comes to 25.17% as compared to 26% earlier. So you have to take a trade-off whether when you are beneficiary in other scheme or not. You also will have to see whether you have a MAT credit, whether because MAT credit, if you are going for a new scheme, you will have to write off the entire MAT credit. It is not available. And another very important thing is that if you opt for any scheme, it's an irrevocable choice. You cannot go back to the earlier scheme. So a very important decision that you have to take right now. And once you opt for the new scheme, you all have to be very careful. You have to file a form 10IC. I think most of us are not aware, but there is a form called 10IC and form 10ID, which are applicable if you opt for a new scheme under 115 BAA or BAB. Accordingly, I show you the forms. I have the form, so you can accordingly for all these are deductions that you stand to lose. I think we all are aware of this, like 35AD, 35AC, 10AA, and Chapter 6A also, Part C, except 80JJAA, we stand to lose. These are the two new forms, 10IC and 10ID. So you can see these are two, with these forms you will have to file before the ITR date of filing the income tax return, and basis which you will be getting the benefit of the new tax regime. So tax audit, now why these two sections were introduced were mentioned here. I just take you straight away to the tax audit changes now. We have a few more things to be covered. I'll share the presentation. Everything will be given. So you have the 3CA. I think we all know about this common 3CA. The common mistake that we all notice here is that here we have to mention the statutory audit details and not our tax audit details. There are a lot of common mistakes that the articles and the office staff does. 3CB is a simple report, the same thing. And 3CD, as we know, these are the 3C now, Part A and Part B. 1 to 8 clauses, Part A. Part B is 9 to 44. This is all is an overview of 3CD. Now coming to the change that I'm going to say now. So on 1st of October, there was a notification which brought in change in tax audit report. So what are the changes now? After point 8, clause 8 is a clause 8A. So whether the SSC has opted for taxation under 115BA, BAA or BAB. So we have to now mention here whether the tax auditor has, whether the SSC has opted. Hence I was discussing the two new sections, whether it is now made part of the tax audit report itself. And another is this, you can see here, as I said, that if you have any brought forward loss on account of additional depreciation, then you stand to lose that. And they have clarified, they have again mentioned that whatever additional depreciation you lose because of this because of opting to the new scheme, that has to be added to the WDV as on 1st April 2019. So whatever amount you are not allowed under the to be carried forward, you have to mention in the new table now. We introduce these details of the brought forward loss as in the manner to the extent available. So whatever losses, whatever depreciation allowances you are not going to carry forward, you have to mention in this table now. So this was a new notification. So I think till now we have discussed the section 44 AD, 44 AB and ABA. So so the question of Suvarna Lathaji is there that while calculating 2 crore threshold limit, whether to include GST or not. So again, as I said, it all depends upon the method of accounting. If you are not maintaining the books of accounts, normally I would always include GST amount to be on a safer side. That GST should be included, but again it depends upon what kind of a stand you take. And one more thing, since you raised this question, I got to know one more. I would like to deliberate one more thing is, as a professionals, when we are going for 44 ADA, can we mention in our in our ITR that we have not maintained books of accounts? Like when you're going for 44 ADA, in that case you're not supposed to maintain books of accounts. But in our ITR, can we mention, or is there any other thing that stops us from mentioning that? So there's a second schedule to the CA Act which says that every practicing chartered accountant, every firm has to maintain the books of accounts, and that is required as per the second schedule of our CA Act. So somewhere even if the tax audit report, tax 44 ADA allows us not to maintain books of accounts, but we have to be careful about the second schedule of the CA Act also. So now coming to a few quick changes that I want to discuss. Very important one. First is regarding Form 26 AS. I think we all have seen the new form. It has been there now for certain time. So few points only there. So we all know about Form 26 AS. It was there from financial year 2011, wherein we all are now so much used to seeing Form 26 AS. Right from your income that the client has earned to the TS that has been deducted. So no more we are asking for 16 salary certificates or 16A forms. We are directly seeing the Form 26 AS now. It is called annual tax statement. But now in the Finance Act 2020, they brought a major change. It has been renamed. It is now Annual Information Statement. And Finance Act has notified a new section. Basically had brought in a new section 285BB to replace 203AA, and a new Form 26 AS was notified. It was notified on 28th of May. And if you are going to recollect, on 29th of May, a new ITR forms were notified. And just one day before that, they have notified the new Form 26 AS. So what is the new form? This is the old form that we are very much used to seeing. Details of TDS, details of TCS, and details of tax paid, refund, SFT. These are all the things which we are seeing in the current form 26AS. Part G is the TDS default. So very important to mention, it's only TDS defaults. They are not mentioning the tax default. So this is the old form 26AS, and even today, if you see it right now also, there's the old form is only there, except a few changes on the SFT. Rest everything is there as per the old form. Now coming to what is there, this is the old form. I think you all will be used to this, seeing this old form. Now in the old form, if AIR reporting is concerned, there were only these 8 things to be reported. So if your transaction does not fall in these 8 limits, then it has not to be reported over here. It was in the earlier form 26AS. But now, this is what we are seeing right now. In the current form 26AS, this AIR has been replaced by SFT transactions. And SFT under 285BA is a big list. You can see the entire list here now. So all these things will be forming part of your form 26AS. I'll give you a simple example. Now suppose I invest in a company, I purchase shares of a company of more than 10 lakh rupees. Let's say I invest 15 lakhs in a company, XYZ Private Limited. Now a company has an obligation under 245BA that whenever you receive an amount of more than 10 lakhs from a single person, you will have to intimate that intimate in form 61A. Now the company would have reported that Harit Dhariwal has invested 15 lakhs in my company. Now earlier that was not getting reflected in my 26AS. But now, since AIR is removed and SFT is part of the form 26AS, even this transaction of me investing 15 lakhs in a company will also form part of form 26AS. So gradually, I think a lot of information will now be forming part of this. I think most of you would have seen the Twitter and on 13th of August, wherein the government has had, they are proposing even further details to be shown here. Hotel payment more than 50,000. And there are other things which will be forming part of a 26AS form. I don't know till what extent they are going to go, but a lot of things will be forming part of this. So what will be the new form 26AS? There's a new rule 114I, and there are 7 more things to be reported. Now, though they seem to be very simple, I think we will discuss. The first is the TDS TCS, which we are used to seeing. Second is the SFT. Again, as I said, it's a new elongated list. Third is payment of taxes. Fourth is demand and refund. Now, it does not talk about TDS only. It talks about income tax demand and income tax refund. 5 and 6, I don't know how they're going to combine, but they're going to show information relating to pending proceedings and completed proceedings. So if there has been some assessment completed under 143.3 or 147, 148, or 148, so all these things will be now forming part of a 26AS. So whether they are going to do the old assessment, I don't know. Whether it's going to be prospective, we have to wait and watch. And point number 7 deals with any other information. That is the most, I think point number 7 is the most draconian. You can see any other information in relation to subrule 2 of 114I. Now what is subrule 2 of 114I? In short, subrule 2 says that the board may also authorize the principal general, director general of income tax, or the director general of income tax systems, or any person authorized by him to upload the information. Now coming to the third last line, or the information received from any person to the extent as it may deem fit in the interest of the revenue. So in a very nutshell, I would like to say that anything that they feel in the interest of the revenue needs to be forming part of form 26AS, they may notify it. So for example, tomorrow they come and see that jewelry transactions are happening at a very rapid pace. Let us make it compulsory that any jewelry purchase over 2 lakhs will be reported in form 26AS. So these things gives a very wide power to the income tax officers to basically include everything in the new form 26AS. So let us see how the things get captured here. So as I said, AIR versus SFT reporting. SFT reporting is a much elongated and a much long list as compared to the AIR list that we had earlier. Regarding the another press release, a very important one, we all are used to it now. 25% reduction in the TDS and the TCS rates. You can see everywhere the TCS has been reduced till 31st of March. And as we discussed, even for TCS on sale of goods, there was a typo in the press release, but it is 0.075% for the TCS on sale of goods. And if there is no PAN, no Aadhaar, I think the 25% benefits. For example, if TDS has to be deducted 20%, and there is no PAN Aadhaar, then there is no 25% benefit over there. TDS has to be calculated 20% only. So now coming to Form 10DA. So before I start this, I think I want to know how many of you have taken the benefit of Section 80JJAA for any of your clients. because this is a very very important benefit which we as professionals don't take, but it's a very important working that we can do. So anybody who has done 44 section 80 JJAA working for a client and taken the benefit of this section. Or if you want to know about this section more, because it is now a very wide section applicable to most of your clients. And believe me, those of if you are having clients which are under tax audit, who are under the provident fund guidelines, in that case, this is a very very important provision section as well. So anybody who is doing the work of like who wants to learn more about ATJJAA, then only I'll take about the section. Otherwise, I'll just tell you about the form. I think we can keep it interactive. Anybody who want to know more about ATJJAA, or we can directly go to the form. Okay, so ATJJAA, I think I'll just keep it very brief now. ATJJAA is basically more of new employment. So in case you have any new employment wherein you increase the number of employees from your previous year, and then accordingly you have you have a CA certification, you can take the benefit of more than 30% of the employee cost, and all those things are there. So for there's a form 10DA. Now form 10DA, why I'm saying it's important, because before 2 or 3 4 years this was applicable only for the company, for the SSEs who had a factory, who had a certain number of employees. But after 2016-17, these provisions have been relaxed and applicable for every tax audited SSE who is having a provident fund number. So a very very good benefit. I think I'll give you my example for a few of our clients which we do the working. It is a big tax saver, if you have a new employments. So in this case, now I'll be discussing the form. So earlier form 10DA talks about, I'll skip the section. So 10DA talks about reporting. So earlier what was there? Earlier there was simple reporting format. Now this year what they've done is, so those who are, I think when we read the section, there are a few employees. So this section is applicable to employees who are working for 240 days or more with an employer. So what they brought in an amendment, suppose in the year 1, you work for less than 240 days and you are not eligible to take the benefit of ATJJAA, but you remain to continue the employees, contribute the employees in the year 2 for the entire year, then you are eligible to be carried forward in the entire, as a year 1. Your year 2 will become then the year 1 of your employment, and accordingly benefits will be given. So earlier what used to happen, employees, if they are employed after 1st August, let's say they are employed in December. So for that particular year, benefit under 10DA was not applicable or available, and they were not even eligible for the further years. So what they got a very good clarification that suppose for first year, because of the want of days, you could not be forming part of the eligible employees. For the next year, if you serve the entire year, that year will be considered as the first year, and accordingly benefit will be given. So they have modified the form, and you can see here now the additional number of employees. Here it is mentioned that employed during the previous year and employed during the immediately preceding year. So this section is a very very important section, as I keep on saying. Even if you are not not knowing now, but you can go and read about this section, because the benefits are available for 3 years. So if you have a certain, let's say 100 rupees benefit for this year, 100 for 3 years will be available. So very very important section to be taken care of. So yeah, I'll skip the section. I think I'll directly go to the next. It talks about the 269 SU. Again, a very very important amendment. I think I'm not going to cover the e-filing, because I think that everybody would be updated, and there's still so many things to come in. But 269 SU talks about the acceptance of payment through prescribed electronic modes. So again, every person carrying on a business shall provide facility for accepting payment through prescribed electronic modes, in addition to the facility of other electronic modes of payment being provided by such person if his total sales, turnover or gross receipts, as the case may be, exceeds 50 crores. So again, a very important thing, if in case your payment exceeds, if your turnover exceeds 50 crore in the last year, let's say 1920 financial year, in 2021, you have to now provide additional modes of payment to your suppliers. So this provision basically came in the month of, in the Finance Act 2019, number 2019, and they basically had notified the modes on 30th of December. By this notification, they mentioned that, yeah, you have to prescribe, you have to provide debit card powered by RuPay, the UPI Beam, and UPI QR code. These are the three things that they had notified you to provide in addition to your regular cash or ECS or whatever modes you give to your customers. So these modes were effective from 30th of December, and they gave 1 month. Entire January they gave for us to comply. And if you are not complied, then from 1st February they are now they will be levying penalty of 5,000 rupees per day. The only exception that they was recently issued is if you are having only B2B transactions, that is only business to business, and 95% of the amount that you are receiving is other than cash. In that case, you need not provide this alternative modes of payment. So how to comply? This is I think this is again we are getting a lot of notices and emails that your clients are not in the compliances. Then we have to tell our clients to comply it and report it in such a manner that you have to first mention the prescribed payments mode. Then you have to go and put here the compliance portion, whether the nature of business, then whether you have provided the modes. If you put a yes, all the three are compulsory. So you have to also put in the date of implementation. So debit card, when was it implemented? UPI Beam, UPI QR code, when was it done? So once you do it and you upload it, then it is done. Otherwise, you can see here there's a failure to provide electronic modes shall invoke penalty of 5,000 rupees per day from 1st February under the section 271 DB of the Act. So these are basically the penal provisions that are provided. Till now, there is no penalty notice, but it's better that we inform our clients if they are having a turnover of more than 50 crore in the previous year to comply with this additional requirement. So I think I have 15 minutes. I just quickly go to the concluding note that I want to mention. I'm just I recollect what our Honorable Prime Minister had said during the lockdown, that today the world is in pursuit of new business models. India, a youthful nation known for its innovative zeal, can take the lead in providing a new work culture. I envisage this new business and work culture being redefined on the following vowels, and I call them the vowels of the new normal because, like vowels in the English language, these will become essential ingredients of any business model in the post-COVID world. This pandemic is sure to rewrite the rules of business. And what did he mention about the new vowels? I think it was first adaptability. We as chartered accountants, it's high time for us to be adaptable. This year we won't be getting a lot of hard copies. We have to work from home, maybe work from our office on more of digital use. We have more of pen drives, more of emails, more of Google drives, and all these things we have to be now adaptable to that things. Second, he had mentioned about the efficiency. As it says, productivity and efficiency matter more than the appearance of effort. I think we have to, rather than spending the entire night in office, let us be more productive. Especially, I keep on telling to my articles and office staff, whatever Facebook, Insta, whatever you want to do, please do it in your free time, not when you're doing your work. Increase your efficiency. Third is inclusivity. Very well, he mentioned about the care for the poor and nature and health solutions. And opportunity. Yes, it's a brilliant opportunity for us as professionals because we can connect to so many people. Like I could connect to you via virtual mode. Even we can connect to our clients. Now there's no need to travel to our clients' offices or factories. We can directly have a Zoom call or a video call, whatever. So that kind of opportunity to even meet new clients, your prospective clients. Again, it's a good thing. And obviously universalism. He mentioned that the idea is to find global relevance and application. So with this, I think this is a picture which I would like to end up with. This talks about the old crow and the modern crow. So we all heard about the old crow, wherein we all have to be working hard, persevere for our work and everything. But it's time for us to become a modern crow, wherein we create our own news story. We have to update ourselves daily because it saves a lot of our efforts. So with this, I think I just would like to conclude. And if you have any questions, I have 10-15 minutes to take the questions.
Thank you, sir. That was really a wonderful session. When you have given the date for us on 21st, you have confirmed it was just a coincidence that today and the Dasra 9 days, puja of Saraswati Devi, Lord Saraswati, as we chartered accountants will be learning day in, day out. And today with the coincidence, everybody are showered with the knowledge of Section 206, Sri Panej and tax audit, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions? If any participant has, we can discuss.
Questions, members, if you are having any questions, you may unmute yourself and please ask the speaker. If not, informal interaction. If you feel a question and answer is a formal interaction.
No, it has to be absolutely informal. We all are professionals. It's good to interact and good to find new thought processes.